Well, is there any way to get the cost of buying a home lower? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, there are big hopes for a real estate rebound in 2026, yet new homeowners are asking the right question, which is, how can I make this payment lower? Today, to explore the topics of affordability is mortgage consultant Mark Pfeiffer. Mark, always great to have you on the program.
Always good to be here, Mr. Bob.
So before we get to today's topic, let's talk a little bit about the videos and the information that you're putting out. You do a lot of educational type videos. I want to make sure that listeners know about. And I know that you shot one this morning. What'd you talk about today?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we do these every Thursday we throw them up on our YouTube channel, but we do them for mainly realtors, builders, people in the industry, just to keep them apprised of what's going on. But the interesting part is now with all this mess going on in the Middle East, rates, if you recall, Bob, when we talked in February, were 5.9. Now they're in that 6.4 today, according to Mortgage News Daily website. So what I've now seen over the last few weeks and with the Fed and everything, it just seems like we're going to be stuck kind of in this just status quo for a while. A lot of the projections that were out there for 26 and 2027 have now been revised to say they're basically going to be kind of where they are now. So, hopes of getting back down to the fives have suddenly, come to the point where we just got to be thankful for being in the low to mid sixes at this point, with oil being as expensive as it is and just kind of what's happening. So, not bad news, not good news, just news.
Well, and it might be that it's going to be this way for a while. So, people who are out to buy a home really need to think about, do I get it done? Do I get it done now in this environment, or do I continue to wait, which may be a while?
Yeah, you and I talked about that before, right? So if and when, and I'll tell you, I don't know if it was a New Year's resolution, but the minute clock struck 12 on January 1st this year, for the first 60 days of this year, the phones were ringing. People were getting pre-approved. People were out there making offers and contracts. And it just shows how much lower rates really do kind of drive that demand, which is, I find it a little crazy. I mean, I get it, but apparently people are that sensitive to it to where it's just even that 0.2, 0.3 drop can really mean something. So now if rates do stay steady, I don't know what that does for demand. I mean, just being completely candid with you, I realize I'm the expert on this phone call in the housing market, but the reality is if things are just going to stay where they are, it does muddy that water for where we are, because we were thinking and hoping that it was going to be a great year for the housing market, but it may just be status quo. Again, not bad, not good, just is.
But, if we're looking for any good news, at least we can establish, I think that you'll agree with this, we can establish what status quo is, because it seems like we've had this conversation so many times where, the rates would drop down to below 6, and they come right back up to about 6, mid sixes, and that's once again that's where they are today. The good news is status quo is not in the 7s.
Yeah, 100%, and that's the very whether you want to call it the glass half full or the mortgage guy being a salesperson. The reality is rates are good. Historically, Bob, you know this. Rates are, if you took the average of rates, over across 100 years, they sit there somewhere between 6 and 8%. So the fact that we're in that lower range, we were spoiled with COVID, and even the years leading up to it, rates were in the 5s, and all of a sudden, for a moment in time, 3s and 4s. Look, 6 point anything historically is a great rate, and so I think that's what people need to keep in mind. The market, like I said, people ask me routinely, a couple times a day, how's business? Well, it's good. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just good. And we're very blessed to be here in North Texas, where we have not just we have a diverse economic, we're diverse in the economy, I should say. And then the housing market, we got land to build on, which keeps houses relatively low, house prices relatively low, because we got places that continue to build. So I think overall, it's a good market. I don't want to poo-poo this thing and say it's bad. Look, it's a good market. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just a good market.
Well, and I also think too that you can look at it this way as well, is that if you're in the market for a house, you buy that house today, and then how far down do interest rates have to drop with everything that's happened that you go, you know what, right now is the time to refinance?
Yeah, good question. So I would say generically, like there's a rule of thumb out there that says, when rates go half a point lower, it's not a bad rule. I would say there could be instances where that may not be true. Maybe it needs to go a little more or a little less. But I would say generically speaking, a lot of folks hear that, if my rate's not half a point lower, it's not worth it. I would just say this. If you're not sure and you don't know exactly what you need, I call it a strike rate. Like this one is where I'm actually going to pounce, right? Where you do something. Call a mortgage professional and have that conversation. It doesn't cost you any money. It may cost you about 15 minutes, 20 minutes of just, chat with somebody, but figure out where it is. So that way, if it is 0.5, you know that. If it's 0.7, 0.3, whatever your scenario looks like, it's hard to know, but just run the numbers and find out for yourself. And then you can, have an educated understanding of where you need that rates to be to make sure it makes sense for you.
I tell you what, though, I really do believe this. I know you're on the same page. When this thing turns around, it's going to be interesting.
It will. I'm by the way, I'm not opposed to keeping rates where they are, because here's the benefit of steady rates. And you and I talked about this in the past when they were whipsawing around post-COVID. At least with steady rates, people kind of know what to expect. Appreciation doesn't just go off the rails, good or bad. Steady Eddie's, it's predictable. It's good. If you sell your house today, you can, go buy a house tomorrow and know that you're probably okay versus, if you buy it when the prices were super, super high and, you always got that fear of nobody wants to catch the falling knife. So I really do believe boring is good. I think if we keep rates in that 6 to 6.5 range, I think that's a healthy rate. I think it's a good one. And, as far as the housing market, to get 2 and 3%, 4% appreciation a year, that's great. We don't need 10% a year. That just hurts the affordability and certainly the home. Right. I love it. But you always, if you're going to buy another home down the road, not ideal. So I'll take slow and steady all day.
Let me ask you this, Mark. Are we, and I can't remember what the time period actually is, but there is a time period I think about right now where seasonality takes over and really people get out and they start looking to buy, want to get in a home before school starts, that type of thing. What kind of effect does seasonality, or really does it have an effect while we're kind of stuck in this whatever it is?
Yeah, you're 100% right, and the time is now, right? So the spring selling season starts, and it makes typically you'd think and hope for a hot summer. To your point, people start getting ready if they haven't already. Like spring break, right, is when you start saying, okay, housing inventory should increase, meaning more houses come on the market because people are getting ready for the end of school, listing their houses, and the hope and dream is that you sell your house and then can buy the new house before the next school year starts. So this is a time of year where you typically see more houses come online. And in the event that the market is stale, which, the last 30 days, the market has been stale since the bombs have been flying, call it what's been now almost 60 days. The reality is like people just aren't quite sure what's around the corner. So it's more. So the good news, if you're a buyer, good news is more inventory is coming online because people do move. Whether they want to or need to. And so it just makes it to where I feel like it's a pretty well-balanced market. I don't think it's a seller's market. I don't think it's a buyer's market. And certainly little pockets can exist. But I think overall, I'd say it's a pretty just steady market. It's kind of, it's shaping up to be the theme of this phone call. Things are just good. Like, I think it's fair for both parties because it is that spring selling season now where people are getting ready to get their houses listed.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. Talking to Mark Pfeiffer, And if you want more information on Mark, you go to mortgagemark.com. One last thing before we move on, talking about the videos. You shot a video, I think it was a couple months ago, about 2 zip codes that everyone is flocking to in the DFW area. Assuming that that is still the case, what are those 2 zip codes and why?
Yeah, that was wild, and I do remember that because number 2. So this, if I'm not mistaken, it was hottest zip codes in the nation.
Wow.
The nation. Number 2. And I had to Google it. I hadn't been to Crandall since I was in high school for a basketball game. Crandall, Texas.
Crandall, Texas.
In the country, Bob.
Wow.
So Crandall is east. So if you're in Dallas, you go east and a little south, if memory serves me. And Crandall is number 2. And the biggest reason I can remember is the median home price, like the average, not the average, but the median home price in Crandall was like $260,000. And to put that in perspective, even North Texas, but just the average median home price is over $400. So Crandall is number 2, driving affordability. I remember the second zip code in the top 10 was a zip code in Dallas proper, so 75251. So you're like, well, where's that? Just think of 75 and 635 if you're familiar with that area, that general vicinity. And I got to tell you, I don't know why that zip code. There's nothing in there that I can figure out, and I've asked an agent or 2, but I think Austin was somewhere middle of the pack. So 3 of the hottest zip codes were here in Texas. Pretty crazy to me.
Well, I automatically break out into an anxious sweat when you say consider 75 and 635. That reminds me of stuck traffic. But and to go on that every day, that's interesting. You just never know what people will flock to. And the other thing too, as you've seen, if you new builds, if you want new builds, you got to go out. It looks like you have to go north.
Yeah, north. I mean, look, it's really you can go any direction, but I'd say most of the build that I see and deal with is going to be north, east, and then west. Like you can go west of Fort Worth and you go east of Dallas, and certainly north of where you and I are. I'm confident, sure there's some south, but I'd say those are the 3 where I see more, at least more of my world pictures. But yeah, I mean, that's the beautiful part about Dallas, right? Or just the greater North Texas, is you can go somewhere and find a house for $260. You might have to look it up on the map to figure out where Crandall is. No disrespect to Crandall, and I'm sure it's a lovely community, but you may have to look it up on the map. But you can find homes still in the 250s. Which makes it very affordable and good for them. I'm glad we're able to build products like that to accommodate, because again, we are still growing here in North Texas, which again goes back to the show opening. We're in a good market. Again, it's not great, but it's good. It has something for everybody out there.
Let's after doing the radio for as long as you and I've done it together, I hear you repeat things, and one of the things that you've said many times is that just because, and this kind of kicks off our topic on affordability, just because a mortgage company says that you can afford it doesn't mean you can. Talk a little bit about that, because I think that if there's any piece of advice we talk about, it's that one, that you got to be so laser focused on, does this make sense to me? Because it is a big commitment.
It really is, and I still stand by that. And you and I both, I know we are, that's part of the reason why you have me on this awesome program, is because I know we have values that align. And the reality is, I do believe that, again, homeownership, even if you can, doesn't mean you should. And there's a lot of reasons why I can argue somebody should. There are really good reasons why people shouldn't buy. I think everybody should have the opportunity to. I do believe in that, but the reality is, it doesn't mean you should. And in terms of affordability, if somebody's out there thinking, man, I'm thinking about doing something, my number one suggestion and recommendation, figure out your own budget first. Figure out where you feel like your comfort zone is, and figure out what makes sense for you, because, if you have those numbers in advance, then when you talk to a mortgage professional and they can tell you, hey, here's what you can do, stick to your guns and do what's right when you had a level head, and don't get the excitement and the emotion of seeing like, oh, I can go afford this much more. Again, I think that's the part where you still gotta live life. And if somebody says, man, I'm okay being house poor and I'm going to spend all my nights, weekends, and, in here and not go on vacation, more power to them. But just have that plan in place and be proactive and set your plan, and don't let somebody set it for you.
This is where I think it's so very important to have that relationship with a mortgage consultant, because you get into a situation where, I mean, and you see this every day, it's a highly charged emotional process. And you certainly don't need a mortgage consultant stirring the fires and get you going and helping you make a bad decision. You know what I mean? It's just so very important that once again that you do this and do it right.
And I'll echo that, and I'll say I couldn't agree more. And the other part that maybe folks don't know this, and this is going to sound like a negative thing, and it can be, but I'm also going to say this is not a negative thing. The mortgage industry is very much based on commissions, meaning you don't get paid unless you close a loan. So understanding that, that's where people, and I'm not saying people are bad, loan officers are bad. There are great ones out there for sure, but as in the industry, you may have a few bad actors out there that give the industry a bad name, but just understand, having that right professional in your corner is super important, where they understand doing what's right is better for their career long term, as opposed to just putting somebody in the mortgage to get paid. And that's where you do see people getting in trouble and being taken advantage of, is when somebody has commission breath and they're just trying to make a sale to make a sale. And that's certainly the wrong way to do it.
It is, and it's just thinking that there's lots of different programs that you could show somebody, and for those who don't have 20% to put down, this gets into a little bit of a gray area, because I don't think that they realize how much that total mortgage payment really does go up when you don't have the 20% to put down.
Yeah, and that's just, again, knowing the options, right? And it goes back to what we just said as far as just working with somebody who's, credible and, has integrity and is going to show you the options, explain the options, and make sure you understand why. Because I'll tell you what, there are some great programs that have little to no money down. And if it's the way to get into homeownership, the average homeowner, the numbers increase. I just saw a stat that says the average homeowner has a net worth 45x greater than the average renter. And it makes sense, because you're going to pay money, right? Whether it's rent or a mortgage, you're going to pay somebody something. So it might as well be yourself, right? And build equity and get appreciation and do all those things. So I'm absolutely I wouldn't be in this industry, but I absolutely am a believer of real estate and owning a home. I do think it's a financial benefit. I don't know that should be your motivator, because I do think just having a home, there's an emotional and sort of mental aspect and tied to it as well. But the reality is, again, it goes back to the theme: do it the right way. If you aren't putting down 20%, there are some great programs out there. Just make sure you understand which one's right for you, and that does take some work, and just working with the right person for sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the dreaded property taxes, because this has become a big topic. Talk a little bit about where they are. Do you see them coming down? I mean, what's happening in that area?
Yeah, so it depends on where you live. So for those that don't know, property taxes, they're a combination of two things for determining the value, or more than that really. But the two big ones is, what is the taxing authority? What do they assess your home's value to be? Which, by the way, is different than what your home's worth, right? They don't come in your home. They don't do a valuation. They just kind of say, okay, based on this home, this area, this size, they give you some tax valuations. And then secondly, whatever the tax rate is, right, for your city, your school, your county, or whatever it is where you live, you take that tax rate times that, that value, and that's going to be the base taxes, property taxes you pay on that home. So in terms of the question, how do you get them down? And the easiest way is, if you do live there, file for a homestead exemption. It's free. Secondly is contest your property value. Again, it's not your home value. It's what they think your home is worth. And there's services that do it. Some are good, some are bad. But it's free to contest it on your own. And I would just say the best way to get your taxes down is contest that value and vote accordingly. Because if your property taxes go up, the tax rate goes up, is because the city and county and all that stuff spending more money. So go, as a voter, voice your opinion and keep the taxes where you think are appropriate.
Well, another aspect of home affordability is homeowners insurance, and how has that gone up here over the last year or so? And the other thing too, to add to that question, is it seems to me, and you can comment on this, that the severe weather, just the tornadoes, the softball, baseball size hail, which is unbelievable. We saw, I guess, a couple of days ago. Won't that drive up the homeowners insurance as well?
Absolutely. So if you say, hey, what has it done? It's gone up a lot. And any insurance person here in North Texas will tell you a lot of the carriers have just pulled out for the simple fact that, I mean, think about it. We had tornadoes in 2018. I think we had 6 or 7 at one time.
Right.
To your point, baseball size hail that just, can decimate a house or a city even, like you said a couple of days ago. Just all the different, then the extreme summer heat for foundation and all these other things that can go wrong. It has gotten very expensive from an insurance standpoint. And unfortunately, I don't know what to do because when carriers pull out, that just makes it to where the existing ones that stick around probably have to charge more in terms of premiums.
Right.
Make sure that they're, because they now have more exposure than they probably want in one particular area. So it is a problem. I don't know how to fix it, and I'm not here to tell you that I'm a weather expert, but I don't see it getting better. And it's just part of, you just got to bake that into the cake, so to speak, when you start doing your budget. Is insurance is here, and what's it today, and it could be more expensive and probably will be more expensive 3 and 5 years from now.
If you want more information on Mark, you can go to mortgagemark.com. Let's used to adjustable rate mortgages was a pretty good option that you could make that payment a little bit more affordable. Of course, there's responsibilities to go along with that. How do adjustable rate mortgages fit into this environment?
They're starting to gain a little popularity, but overwhelmingly it's still fixed rate mortgages. Some of that could be just the psychological effect that comes with getting a mortgage that where the rate's going to be changing on you in the future. But I think a lot more likely is that just the economics, without going into the details, the yield curve that's out there still makes it to where the long-term rates are still relatively good, and the short-term rates, like the ARMs, which are typically short-term, like 3, 5, 7-year ARMs, there's just not enough benefit to take on that risk, at least in the consumer's eyes. So we still don't see a lot of ARMs, but certainly it can help, take that lower rate and lower the payment. There are instances where I think it makes absolute sense. It's just right now the market's not making it a no-brainer, so it's got to be for that person that understands it and understands that there is a benefit for them.
Let's talk one more question, and obviously you have closing costs that you tack on to it. Let's say that a homeowner wants to roll that into the note. Now, let's say that before you roll that into the note, everything was perfect, the ratios were good. Does that count against you if you roll those closing costs into the note?
Great question. Yeah. So people that, when you're buying a home, people say, man, I want to roll in the closing costs. The way you do that is you got to ask Mr. or Mrs. Seller to basically pay that quote for you. Now, the way you're doing it as a buyer is, let's just take a round number scenario. If you're buying a house for $400,000 and like you said, everything's settled and we've high-fived and everything's good, and all of a sudden you say, man, I wouldn't mind $4,000 of these closing costs just going away. The way to quote roll it in is you tell Mr. Homeowner Mr. Seller is, instead of $400,000, I'm going to pay you $404,000, so long as you pay $4,000 of my closing costs. So what does that do? It just makes it to where you're buying the home for $4,000 more. They pay for the $4,000, and so in theory, your loan amount will go up approximately the same $4,000, and that's how you roll it in. So how does it impact you? If you're going to add $4,000 to your loan balance, you just got to make sure you got enough wiggle room in there to where you can qualify for the extra $4,000.
Right.
So there's a few other caveats, and that's call it 80-90% of the gist. There's a few little details, but I do love people rolling it in because, again, at the end of the day, moving's expensive too.
Yeah, it is.
Keep as much money in your pocket as you can coming out of the gate, and certainly later on, once the dust settles, if you want to pay off that $4,000 extra on your mortgage, you can do that 6 months from now as a homeowner.
Great info, Mark. Once again, if you want information on Mark, you go to mortgagemark.com. Mark, we will talk to you next month.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, go to prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.